I was only 25 years old and newly married when it all began. At that stage of my life, I truly believed I was living a real fairy tale. You know that feeling when everything finally falls into place? That's how I felt next to Jack, my husband. He seemed to be everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Jack was affectionate, attentive, always concerned about me and our future. He was the kind of man everyone around us praised, hardworking, dedicated, and kind. We met in college, and after 3 years of dating, we decided it was time to take the next step. We got married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded only by our closest family and friends. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. The sky was clear, a gentle breeze rustled the flowers around us, and Jack's smile as he recited his vows was something that never left my memory. We moved into a beautiful house, a wedding gift from his father, Robert. The house was located on the outskirts of Boston, in a quiet neighborhood, surrounded by trees and with a garden that looked like it came straight out of a movie. I felt truly blessed to have found someone like Jack and, of course, to have a father-in-law like Robert. He was a 55-year-old man, but with an energy that many younger people envied. He always treated me very well, as if I had been part of the family from the start, and I was very grateful for that. The first few months of marriage were a true dream. Jack and I spent hours decorating our home, planning our future, and enjoying the beginning of our life together. Everything seemed perfect, as if I were living a love story like those seen in movies. And why wouldn't it be that way? I had married the man I loved, had a comfortable life, and a bright future ahead. But as they say, not all that glitters is gold. Little did I know that my fairy tale was about to turn into something I could never have imagined. What seemed to be the beginning of a happy life together was actually the start of a major emotional upheaval that would completely change the course of our lives. From the moment I met Robert, my father-in-law, I felt something special about him. He was the kind of person you instantly felt you could trust. At 55, Robert had always been extremely kind to me, and from the beginning, he treated me as if I were part of the family, even before the wedding. I remember how he made a point of including me in everything, from family lunches to more intimate conversations about the future. I always felt at ease around him. He was welcoming and had a strong presence, but never intimidating. He had a peculiar way of showing affection. Always concerned, he would ask how my job was going, how I felt about the new house, and even if I was adjusting well to married life. Sometimes he would surprise us with fresh fruit from the market or flowers to decorate our table. He said it was a simple gesture, but to me, it seemed like sincere care, a genuine affection for me and our relationship. Robert had a charming personality, the kind that won everyone over. He was very sociable, always with a funny story to tell, and at family gatherings, he was the center of attention. Everyone adored him. The way he spoke, always smiling with that warm look, made any conversation enjoyable. Even in the quietest moments, he seemed to bring a sense of peace, a calmness. I felt safe with Robert around, as if he were a kind of safe harbor for our family. If I needed anything, I knew I could count on him. For example, once when Jack had to travel for work, Robert insisted on helping me. He called me almost every day to check on me and even came over a few times to see if I needed anything. I remember thinking, how lucky I am to have such a wonderful father-in-law. Of course, I was always told that having such a good relationship with in-laws was rare. Many friends talked about the difficulties they had with their mothers-in-law or fathers-in-law, but I couldn't complain about anything. In fact, I considered myself fortunate to be surrounded by such kind and attentive people. So, I could never have imagined that behind all that kindness, something else was happening. Something that would soon destroy everything I believed to be true. It was an ordinary day, like any other. I was at home, enjoying the silence after a busy morning. Jack had gone to work, and I decided to take a long, relaxing bath, one of those moments when you want to disconnect from everything and just let the hot water wash away your thoughts. I got into the shower, closed my eyes, and let the water run over my shoulders, savoring the tranquility. There was nothing wrong. It was just another normal day, or so I thought. As the sound of the water falling filled the bathroom, suddenly, I heard a noise. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but enough to catch my attention. In that instant, my body tensed. I assumed it was something common, maybe the wind hitting the door or the floorboards creaking, something that happened from time to time. But then I realized that the bathroom door was being opened. At first, I thought it was Jack, who had come back early. He always joked about coming into the bathroom to surprise me, so I wasn't immediately concerned. But when the door opened fully, to my surprise, it wasn't Jack who appeared. It was Robert, my father-in-law. I was frozen, unsure of what to do or say. My heart raced. He stood there for a moment, as if trying to say something, but said nothing. I was there, completely vulnerable, not understanding what was happening. My mind went blank. The discomfort overwhelmed me immediately. Something felt wrong, very wrong. He didn't say a word, just looked at me for a few seconds, which felt like an eternity. My heart was beating so fast I could hear the sound of my own labored breathing, mixed with the sound of the water. Why did he come in here? I wondered. Finally, I regained my composure and asked, with a trembling voice, "Robert, what are you doing?" He seemed confused, as if lost, and then quickly said he thought no one was in the bathroom, that he had entered by mistake. He apologized and left, closing the door quickly. But something inside me was unsettled. It was hard to accept it as just a simple mistake. Why hadn't he knocked before coming in? Why hadn't he heard the sound of the water running? All these questions started swirling in my head. The discomfort wasn't just because he had seen something he shouldn't have, but because that moment had changed something. I knew that from that moment on, our relationship would never be the same. I got out of the shower quickly, my heart still racing and my mind confused. That small, seemingly innocent incident had left a mark on me. And no matter how much I tried to justify it to myself as just a misunderstanding, a part of me knew there was something more. And that left me unsettled. After that strange day in the bathroom, something started to change inside me. Although I tried to leave the incident behind, I couldn't ignore the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. The mere thought of Robert, my father-in-law, began to make me nervous and confused. It was a mix of guilt and something I couldn't quite name. I felt there was a thin line now separating us, and every time he appeared, that line seemed to narrow. Weeks went by, and encounters with Robert became more frequent. Everything started to seem innocent. He would come to our house for dinners or to drop off things for Jack. On my part, I began to notice that every time he entered the room, there was a tension in the air, a kind of silent expectation hanging between us. During dinners, something had changed in the dynamic. Robert seemed more attentive, his eyes not straying from me as they once did. When he spoke, there was a tone of intimacy that hadn't existed before. Our glances crossed more often than I remembered, and every time it happened, I felt an electric current run through my body. It was a strange feeling, mixed with guilt and an uneasy desire. At first, I tried to ignore these sensations, thinking they were just side effects of an unexpected event. But over time, these emotions began to intensify. Our meetings became more frequent and somehow more charged with tension. I started to find excuses to leave the house and meet him in discreet places, away from curious eyes. Isolated cafes, quiet parks, or even Robert's office when we were sure no one else would be there. With each encounter, adrenaline coursed through my veins. The world seemed to disappear when we were together. I felt alive in a way I had never experienced before. Robert was passionate, full of exciting stories about his travels and adventures, and I found myself fascinated by him, absorbing every word, every glance. With him, I felt desired, special, as if I were the only person in the world who really mattered. But guilt consumed me. I knew what we were doing was wrong, that I was betraying Jack, the man I loved and with whom I had made vows of fidelity. Yet, the confusion inside me seemed endless. When Robert was around, guilt seemed to vanish, replaced by an overwhelming desire I couldn't control. Each moment with Robert was a mix of pleasure and dread. With each touch, each smile, I felt increasingly trapped in a web of conflicting emotions. The guilt of betraying Jack mixed with the excitement of being with Robert, creating a whirlwind of emotions I didn't know how to handle. It was as if the line between right and wrong was fading, and I was struggling to find a balance, a way to understand what was happening to me. The feeling of living a constant lie, while my heart seemed divided between two worlds, was slowly consuming me. Each secret meeting with Robert intensified the internal conflict I felt, and I knew I was approaching a breaking point. The confusion and tension that had grown between Robert and me began to escalate with each meeting. On a particularly cold night, we were alone in a discreet cafe, our favorite spot for secret rendezvous. The atmosphere was charged, as if even the walls were complicit in our secret. Robert seemed restless, his expression distant and his eyes fixed on mine. I was nervous, my hands trembling slightly as I held my coffee cup, trying to hide my anxiety. It was then that he broke the silence hanging over us. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low and almost hesitant. "Since that day, I can't get you out of my mind. It's like I'm stuck in an endless loop." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The weight of his confession was overwhelming. I knew he was struggling with his own feelings, but hearing it directly from him made the reality of the situation even clearer. He was as consumed by me as I was by him. Those words from Robert were the catalyst that accelerated what had already begun to grow between us. From that moment on, our meetings became more frequent and clandestine. We sought any opportunity to be together without anyone suspecting. Each meeting was carefully planned, away from Jack's curious eyes and anyone else who might notice something unusual. Our rendezvous became true secret rituals. We met in discreet hotels, rented apartments for a night, or even isolated spots in the city. With each meeting, the excitement and adrenaline were palpable. It was as if we were living in a suspense film, always with the feeling that we could be discovered at any moment. The connection between us deepened. Our conversations were filled with confidences and secrets, something that bound us even more. Robert was attentive and affectionate, and I felt valued and desired in a way I had never experienced before. In each touch, each kiss, there was a mix of passion and desperation, as if we were trying to make up for all the time we had lost. Over time, the affair became an inevitable part of our lives. The thrill of secret meetings and the intensity of what we shared made the outside world disappear. Each meeting was a reminder that we were living a lie, but at the same time, the experience of being together was so powerful that I found myself unable to resist. Guilt and fear of being discovered were constants, but they were overshadowed by the strength of the passion we felt for each other. It was a vicious cycle. Desire drew us together, while fear and guilt pushed us apart. With each new encounter, Robert and I delved deeper into the complexity of our relationship, knowing we were betraying trust and would inevitably have to face the consequences. But at that moment, we were just two people trying to find something real amidst the chaos we had created. Days began to drag on like a slow-motion film, and my life seemed to be splitting into two distinct worlds, as if I were living in a parallel reality. On one side was Jack, the man with whom I had promised to spend my entire life. On the other side was Robert, with whom I lived a secret and overwhelming passion. Guilt began to consume me. I woke up every morning with the weight of betrayal crushing me. I looked at Jack, who was still so loving and attentive, and wondered how I could have jeopardized everything. His smile, his kind words, and the moments we shared now seemed like a lie, a facade for the betrayal hiding in the shadows. With Robert, it was an emotional roller coaster. Our secret meetings were filled with intensity and desire, and he made me feel an excitement I didn't know was missing from my life. But each time the last hotel door closed and the last light went out, I returned to reality, and guilt wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Sometimes, the dilemma manifested in my dreams, where I saw Jack and Robert side by side, as if they were two parts of me vying for my attention. I found myself trying to justify the betrayal to myself, creating scenarios where I could have the best of both worlds, even though I knew it was impossible. At work, in my social life, and even during leisure moments, guilt manifested in every thought and action. Every laugh shared with Jack was overshadowed by the memory of secret moments with Robert. And each moment with Robert was a reminder that I was deceiving someone I loved. The dilemma was not just about love and attraction. It was an internal battle between what I knew was right and what my heart desired. The feeling of being torn between two lives was overwhelming. I wondered if I could continue living this lie or if, eventually, the truth would emerge and destroy everything I had built. Each time I looked at Jack, I felt a pang in my heart. He was the pillar of my life, the person with whom I had made promises, and despite my flaws, he was the anchor keeping me grounded. The thought of hurting him, of destroying the trust he had placed in me, terrified me. At the same time, there was something undeniable about the attraction I felt for Robert. It was an intense passion and a connection that seemed to defy logic and reason. He offered me a sense of freedom and adventure I had never experienced before, and it was hard to resist his magnetic presence. Each day, I found myself trapped in an emotional labyrinth, trying to find a way out while carrying the weight of guilt. The life I had chosen was slowly disintegrating, and the only thing I knew for sure was that I needed to face the truth about what I really wanted and what I was willing to lose. Here is the translation into English. Strich. As the weeks passed in a whirlwind of emotions, the tension between what I felt for Robert and my love for Jack intensified. Each meeting with Robert was charged with an overwhelming desire, but it also brought with it a growing anxiety. I was torn, struggling to balance the passion and guilt that consumed me. One night, after a silent dinner filled with palpable tension, Robert decided it was time to confront the situation head-on. He was determined to resolve the turmoil that seemed to dominate our lives. I looked at him, his eyes reflecting a determination I knew well, and realized that something significant was about to happen. He looked at me with an intensity that made me feel as though I was being examined in an intimate and profound way. His voice was laden with an emotion I had never heard before. "We need to talk about what's happening between us," he began, his voice firm yet gentle. "I can't live in this uncertainty anymore. The truth is, I want to be with you, and I want it to be forever. We can't continue like this, divided between two worlds. I want us to run away together, to leave everything behind and start a new life where it can just be the two of us." His proposal took me by surprise. I knew Robert was in love with me, just as I was with him, but the idea of leaving Jack, of destroying everything we had built together, was an overwhelming burden. My heart ached just thinking about the pain it would cause Jack. "Robert, I began, trying to find the right words. "I understand what you're saying, and I feel the same way. But I can't just abandon everything like this. Jack doesn't deserve this. I still love him, and he is an important part of my life. Destroying what we've built together would be cruel and unfair. I can't do that." Robert's expression changed, a mix of pain and understanding in his eyes. I could see he was hurt by my refusal, but he also understood the depth of my dilemma. "I know it's difficult," he said, his voice a little softer, "but I just wanted you to know that I'm willing to do anything to be with you. If you need more time, I understand. I just don't want you to feel trapped between two worlds not knowing what to do." I felt a wave of gratitude and sadness at the same time. Robert was showing a vulnerability I hadn't seen before, and it only made the situation more complicated. I wanted to be honest with him, but I also needed to be fair to Jack. "I need to think about this," I replied, my voice choked. "I need to understand what I really want and how I can do this without causing more pain to those I love." Robert nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. He knew the decision wouldn't be easy and that the answer wouldn't come immediately. We both knew there was a crucial decision to be made, and that the path ahead was filled with uncertainties and challenges. The rest of the night was silent, with both of us lost in thought. I felt paralyzed, unable to find a clear solution, while Robert waited patiently for my decision. The tension between us was palpable, and I knew the weight of our future choices would be immense. As I drove home that night, the city lights seemed to reflect the turmoil within me. The dilemma of choosing between the life I had with Jack and the new life Robert was offering me seemed an impossible task. The decision I had to make was more than just a choice between two people. It was about the integrity of my own self and the impact of my actions on the future. The night that followed Robert's proposal was marked by tense silence. I knew I needed to make a decision, and the weight of the choice was just beginning to show. But fate, as always, had its own way of intervening. One day, while I was alone at home, the phone rang. The number on the screen was Robert's. My heart raced, and a feeling of apprehension washed over me. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hi, Robert," my voice sounded calmer than I felt. Here is the translation into English. Strich. "Hello," he replied, his voice sounding tenser than usual. "We need to talk." I knew this wasn't just a casual phone call. Robert's words from a few days ago were still fresh in my mind, and I felt that something was about to change drastically. I agreed to meet him at a quiet cafe we used to frequent. The place, normally cozy and familiar, now seemed to carry a dark weight, as if it were the stage for a major revelation. When I arrived, Robert was already there, waiting. His eyes had an intense gleam, and he was agitated. We sat at the table, and I could see that something was deeply troubling him. "I've thought a lot since our last conversation," he began, his voice laden with an emotion I couldn't immediately decipher. "And I understand your dilemma, but there's something you need to know." Before I could respond, he continued, "If you really don't want to run away with me, if you want to end all of this and go back to your life with Jack, then I'm going to have to make a decision. If you leave me now, I will have to tell Jack about what happened between us. I can't keep hiding it." I felt a chill run down my spine upon hearing those words. Threat was a word that didn't belong to Robert's usual vocabulary, and the fact that he was using it now was an unexpected blow. "Are you threatening me?" My voice came out almost as a whisper. "Would you really do that?" "I'm not trying to blackmail you," he replied, his expression contorting into a mix of frustration and desperation. "But I can't continue living with this secret. The truth is, I'm hurt, and the only way to resolve this is by facing the situation." I felt utterly desolate. The idea of Jack discovering the truth terrified me. He was a good man, and the prospect of causing him such deep pain was something I didn't want to face. "Please, Robert," I pleaded, desperately trying to find a solution. "Don't do this. Give me a little more time. I need to sort this out the right way, without causing more harm." Robert sighed, his face showing internal conflict. He was clearly struggling with his own emotions, but the threat was clear and forceful. "I really don't want to do this," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "But I need to know where I stand and what to expect. If you really want to end everything, tell me now. Otherwise, I'll be forced to act." I was silent, my mind swirling in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The fear of losing Jack and the frustration of reaching an impasse with Robert were consuming me. The cafe, which had once seemed like a refuge, was now turning into a scene of confrontation and crisis. "I'll think about what you said," I finally managed to say, trying to keep calm. "I need to figure out how to handle this in the best possible way." Robert nodded, but his gaze revealed the sadness and frustration he felt. "All right. But know that time is running out. I hope you make the right decision for all of us." I left the cafe with a muddled mind and a heavy heart. The feeling of being between a rock and a hard place had never been so real. The future was uncertain, and I knew that every choice I made from that moment on would have significant consequences. As I drove home, the night falling around me, I wondered how I had arrived at this point. The questions and doubts about the future and what was right were mingling with the pain and fear of what might come next. The dilemma was no longer just about love and loyalty, but about facing a painful and inevitable truth. Life continued to revolve around an unstable axis. Each day seemed like a dance between concealing the growing inner turmoil and maintaining outward appearances. Jack was beginning to notice that something was wrong, and the pressure to hide the truth was becoming unbearable. Jack had always been perceptive, with a keen eye and a sensitive heart. In the days following Robert's threat, I noticed that he started observing my behavior more closely. Small signs of his concern appeared daily. He asked more frequent questions about my day, noticed subtle changes in my behavior, and was more present than usual. One night, while we were in the living room, Jack approached and asked with a serious expression, "Are you okay? You seem like something's bothering you." I smiled nervously and tried to downplay the situation. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. That's all. Nothing major." Jack didn't seem convinced. There was a sadness in his eyes that seemed to weigh on him. "It's not just that. I feel like you're pulling away. We've been together for a long time, and I feel like I can't ignore what I see anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. The fear and guilt I carried were about to manifest in words. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy, and I knew there was no more avoiding the confrontation. Jack, with his voice choked, continued, "I don't know what's going on, but I need to know. I can't keep living with this sense that we're drifting apart and that you're hiding something from me." I took a deep breath, the pressure inside me becoming unbearable. The decision was made. There was no more room for lies or deceit. With tears in my eyes, I decided it was time to face the truth. Jack, I began, my voice trembling, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He looked at me, his concern mixed with a painful expectation. What happened? Tell me. I faced the truth I was about to share with him, and a sense of desperation overtook me. The words came out as a confession, laden with pain and regret. I've been having an affair, I said, feeling each word like a sharp blade. With your father, Robert. The confession seemed to hang in the air, and Jack was silent, his eyes wide in shock. He stood up abruptly, as if he needed space to process the revelation. What? No, this can't be happening. I know it seems unbelievable, I tried to explain, but it's true. I am deeply sorry. It happened when I was trying to deal with my conflicting feelings, and I made a terrible choice. I didn't know how to stop, and now I see how much it hurt you. Jack was in a state of disbelief. His face was pale, and his posture was rigid. The pain was evident, and he seemed to struggle to find words. Why did you do this? Why didn't you tell me before? I trusted you. I moved closer, trying to seek some solace in his eyes. I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of destroying our life together. I should have been honest from the start, but I let fear paralyze me. He shook his head, helplessness visible in every gesture. I don't know what to do now. My mind is spinning, and what you've told me is devastating. I need time to think. Jack left the room, and the silence that followed felt overwhelming. I knew that words couldn't erase what had happened, and the pain I saw in his eyes was a reflection of the suffering I had caused. That night was a painful test for both of us. I spent hours waiting and reflecting on how much our life had changed, on how much I had ruined something precious to us. Jack needed space, and I was willing to give him all the time he needed to process and decide what would come next. The impact of my confession had cast a shadow over our relationship, and the path ahead was filled with uncertainties. The only thing I knew was that the future was now a vast field of painful possibilities and difficult choices, and I was ready to face the consequences, no matter how hard they might be. Here's the translation into English. Strich. The confession made, silence stretched between us, and I knew that what would come next would be painful. The weight of betrayal was upon us, but to my surprise, Jack did not react with the anger I had expected. Instead, the suffering and confusion in his eyes began to transform into something I had not anticipated, a gradual and painful understanding. After our conversation in the living room, Jack requested some time to think. I spent the night awake, my mind troubled with thoughts of guilt and regret. The next morning, he returned home with an expression of mixed determination and sadness. The time of reflection had given him unexpected clarity. Jack sat next to me in the kitchen, where the morning sun streamed through the windows, bringing a soft light that seemed to contrast with the darkness hanging over us. He began to speak, his voice calm and measured. I spent the night thinking about everything you told me, he started, and despite everything, I can't ignore that Robert was primarily responsible for all of this. The surprise was a mix of relief and uncertainty. Do you really think so? I asked, trying to control the hope and fear in my voice. Yes, Jack replied. I can see that he used his charm and manipulation to lure you in. I know you were confused and vulnerable at the time, and he took advantage of that. He seemed to be grappling with his own feelings of betrayal and pain, but his perspective was a crucial turning point. Jack continued, I understand that what happened wasn't solely your fault. Robert has a way of manipulating people, and he did that to you as well. It was as if a wave of relief and despair washed over me simultaneously. The fact that Jack was beginning to understand the dynamics of the situation gave me a small glimmer of hope. I'm so sorry for everything, Jack. I never wanted this to happen. I was lost and didn't know how to get out of this situation. I just hope we can find a way to fix this. Jack looked at me, his heart heavy but with a determined firmness in his eyes. I want to believe that we can get through this, but it will be a difficult process. I need to know that you are committed to fixing what has been broken and that you are willing to face the consequences. From that moment on, Jack showed remarkable strength. Although the pain and betrayal were still present, he chose to support me and tackle the problem together. He understood that the real enemy was not just me but the cruel manipulation that Robert had perpetrated. We decided to seek help to deal with the emotional complexities and to rebuild trust. We attended therapy sessions, where we discussed our feelings and tried to find ways to restore what had been lost. Jack was willing to go through the healing process, and I was committed to being transparent and doing the necessary work to regain the trust that had been broken. The reconciliation journey was long and filled with ups and downs. But the fact that Jack chose to support me despite his pain gave me a reason to fight for us and our relationship. Gradually, we began to rebuild our life, learning to face our challenges together and to create a new chapter in our story. Although the path ahead was far from easy, Jack's decision to support me and confront Robert's manipulation was a crucial step in our recovery journey. His support, even amid the pain, was a testament to the strength of our love and the desire to overcome adversity together. The tension was palpable in the house. The walls, which had once echoed with laughter and conversation, were now filled with a dense and unsettling silence. Jack, who had spent days reflecting on everything that had happened, finally made a decision that would change the course of our lives. It was a cloudy afternoon when the final confrontation occurred. Jack, with a firm expression of determination, asked Robert to come to our house. I knew that the moment to face the situation was near, and nervousness mingled with a sense of relief. Something needed to be done to restore order and peace in our lives. Robert arrived, as always, with his confident demeanor and unwavering charm. However, upon entering, he quickly realized that the atmosphere was different. The tension was so palpable that it seemed almost visible. Jack invited him to sit, and Robert, though somewhat taken aback, accepted without question. The environment was charged. I was in the living room, at a distance but close enough to hear the conversation unfolding. Jack, with a firm voice, began to speak. Robert, I know you're here with a purpose. And I need you to understand one thing: what happened was unacceptable. You manipulated my wife and put her in an impossible position. Robert, trying to maintain composure, responded with a tone that mixed disdain and indifference. Jack, I understand that you're hurt, but you can't just erase what happened. Life is complex, and sometimes things don't go as planned. Jack did not let himself be shaken. No, Robert. What you did was far beyond a mistake. You were cruel and manipulative, and I cannot allow this to continue. This is the last time you enter this house. I'm throwing you out. The word throwing out sounded firm and definitive. Robert tried to argue, but Jack was not willing to listen. He had made his decision, and nothing would make him change his mind. With a gesture that combined anger and determination, Jack began to remove Robert's belongings from the house. The boxes were stacked at the entrance, and Robert, with a mix of anger and resignation, collected his things. Here's the translation into English. Strich. As Robert left, his expression carried a mix of contempt and surprise. He had never imagined he would be expelled so decisively, but Jack was resolute. With the door closing behind Robert, a new chapter began in our lives. The time that followed was a period of rebuilding and healing. Robert's departure was the first step toward restoring trust and peace in our home. Jack and I faced a long healing process together. It was a path filled with challenges but also with hope. We began couples therapy, where we worked through our wounded emotions and tried to better understand the dynamics that had led us to this situation. There were days when the path seemed impossible, but Jack's determination to restore trust and security in our marriage helped us move forward. Jack's support was crucial. Though pain and betrayal were evident, his decision to end the conflict with his father and focus on our relationship was a testament to strength and love. Together, we began to rebuild what had been broken, learning to deal with the scars and finding new ways to connect and support each other. It was a long and difficult process, but with each step we took, we began to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Robert's departure was not just a resolution to a conflict, it was the beginning of a new journey for us, a journey of recovery, understanding, and above all, renewed commitment to each other. Every day was an opportunity to learn and grow, and Jack's determination to do what was right and support our relationship was the foundation upon which we were rebuilding our lives. And so, despite the difficulties, we began to tread a path of healing and renewal, side by side. The final decision was approaching, and the weight of the choice was evident in every expression. After Robert's expulsion and the intense healing process that followed, Jack and I realized that our life needed a radical change to truly recover and rebuild. The past was deeply rooted in the house where we had lived, and the desire to start anew in a new place began to gain strength. Robert's house, where the scandal and betrayal had occurred, seemed to carry with it all the painful memories we needed to leave behind. It was a place that, although beautiful and comfortable, was imbued with the echoes of a time we wanted to forget. So we decided that the best way to move forward was to sell the house and start fresh in a completely new environment. Selling the house was not an easy task. It was a home that had been witness to many good and bad moments. However, as we began to prepare the house for sale, we found a certain form of closure. Organizing belongings, packing items, and cleaning the spaces felt like a symbolic ritual of liberation. Each box we closed represented a step in our healing process and a new hope for the future. As the house went on the market, Jack and I began to search for a new place to call home. Choosing a new location was an exciting and challenging experience. We wanted a place that did not carry the shadows of the past, a space where we could build new memories and reaffirm our commitment to each other. Finally, we found a small and charming apartment in a quiet area of the city. It was a home with large windows that let natural light in, and a garden where we could plant flowers and maybe even a small tree. It was a space that represented simplicity and renewal, perfect for the new chapter we were about to start. The move to the new home was an important milestone in our journey. As we unpacked and arranged the new space, we felt the internal transformation reflected in our environment. Each piece of furniture placed and each detail decorated represented a step toward building a new life together. Rebuilding our relationship was not something that happened overnight. It was a continuous process of learning to forgive, to trust again, and to cherish the love we had. We attended couples therapy, where we learned about communication, empathy, and how to handle feelings in a healthy way. These moments of reflection and learning were crucial in drawing us closer and strengthening our bond. In the new home, we tried to cultivate an environment of love and respect. We established new traditions, such as cooking together on Sundays and taking walks in the local park, activities that allowed us to rediscover the simple joy of being together. Each small accomplishment and each gesture of affection became symbols of our commitment to making things work. The decision to start over in a new place, away from the shadows of the past, was a courageous and necessary step. We filled our new home with love and hope, and this physical change helped reflect the internal transformation we were experiencing. The process of rebuilding our relationship was not easy, but both of our determination to learn to forgive and value true love made all the difference. Looking back, we realized that despite the difficulties and challenges, this journey strengthened us as a couple. We learned the importance of communication, forgiveness, and constant renewal. In our new home, we continued to write our story, now with a deeper understanding and renewed love, always ready to face whatever the future holds together.